Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, preparing to check in on my two newest systems, which are these two gray trays stacked up one on top of the other. And the newest of my systems, with the exception of the Vermibag Mini over here, are all to the right, and all my oldest systems are off to the left. The Vermibag Mini technically would be right up there amongst my oldest systems. It's just those two trays over there that are older than my Vermibag Mini, and once those get harvested, the Vermibag Mini will take over as my oldest active system. But today the focus is on my two newest systems, which are now only 5 weeks of age, 35 days of age. It's been a couple weeks now, I think 12 days maybe, since we last checked in on these little guys, so I think they're due. So I'm going to put on a glove, get these systems up on the bench, and we're going to get them fed. So let's get to work. Banana peels and carrots are what's on the menu today. I was able to break apart most of this frozen together carrot, but this stuff must have already gotten a little bit mushy in the bag before it was placed in the freezer, so it's holding together quite a bit better than the rest of it. But even if it has to go in as a single hunk, then I believe I've dislodged enough of it to be able to fairly provide just as much to the other bin. The two systems that I worked on yesterday that were also plastic covered had their top papers shredded, and I wasn't prepared with replacements, but I have a suspicion, yeah, look at that, the whole middle of it's been chewed out. Kind of the same story here, so I wanted to be prepared with replacement top coverings for these systems today. It looks like over here in bin number 1 we've got some little volunteer plants that have started growing here. If you ask me, they look like tomatoes. I'm not sure where the seeds came from, but you know, when you're composting your kitchen scraps, there's always a good likelihood that the stuff you're giving them is going to have seeds in them. And this stuff is going to come in really handy as supplemental bedding down in the feeding zone. In fact, the bins I fed yesterday only received the repurposed old top covering newspapers like what we're peeling off here as their bedding for the feeding. I'm thinking once again I should maybe be a little bit better prepared. I'd like to be a little bit more generous than that on bedding, but it's not the end of the world. These are fairly new systems. Well, I mean, newest of my systems, meaning there's probably an abundance of fresh, unused bedding all over the place, so let's not worry about that. Even if it feels like we're being skimpy, we're probably okay. Although I believe that in my past history, I used to be pretty skimpy on the bedding. I thought one of the things that really improved stuff drastically in more recent years was when I made an active effort to be less stingy with the bedding. So there's always my supply of prepared bedding, which maybe I just need to remind myself that I did replenish it a couple days ago. The container sat there virtually empty for probably more than a week until I finally broke down it but made some new prepared bedding the other day, so I am prepared to be a little bit more generous than that. I tell you, considering that this is these are my newest bins, I mean, I know we've only dug into bin number 1 here, but it's fair to expect that what we find in bin number 2 is going to be comparable. Yeah, I think being generous with bedding would be a wise idea. It seems like a whole lot of what's been placed in here as the initial build of the systems, all the bedding, whatever it was made up of, shredded paper, shredded cardboard, leaves, who knows, whatever. It seems like they've been hard at work transforming a good bit of it over into worm castings for us. And we don't want them to lose interest in continuing to do that for us, so we should keep them occupied with more similar stuff to do. So I think besides coming back in here with this piece of salvaged newspaper that's not fitting anymore to be a top covering, and with this one as well, even yesterday when I did this, when I placed the remains of the old top covering newspapers into the feeding zones, it did somehow start to appear like a lot more than what it looked like earlier. So still, I do feel like I could be more generous, but let's just get the food in here and maybe some grit on that, and then we could go grab some more bedding material. I wonder if this thing is going to give. Oh, at least I was able to bust it in half, and I could probably even continue to chip away at it a little bit if I wanted to, but I think a chunk of frozen together material like that should be a-okay. We'll just divvy out the rest of the stuff that I was already able to chip apart earlier up in the kitchen. There's a little bit of frost coming along for the ride here as well, which is fine as well. And, you know, I have to always remind myself because there's these things I forget to do. And one of them is a preventative measure, which is the application of this BTI solution. The stuff is marketed under the packaging mosquito dunks. And I've been seeing flying insects in some of my systems. So even where it doesn't appear to be a problem, I'm putting this stuff in as a preventative measure. And it's just that it's the top coating material. We've already disturbed what was out here on the top and the middle, but it's the stuff where that's exposed to the, you know, top that I suspect that there's probably the flying insects or their larvae or their eggs or whatever. So it seems like the right place to check out on the surface, but sometimes I just forget, and then I get right into tilling everything together, and then what had been the top surface just gets blended in. At least we were able to get some of the stuff that had been the top surface. But you know, before we backfill, we wanted to get in some grit, and I think we should make good on this idea to be generous with the bedding, because really all I need to do is turn around and grab the container from the shelf, because it's right behind me, and grab some. You can see some of the more aged stuff on this side and some of the more freshly prepared stuff on this side. So let's grab a handful where they get a little bit of each. How do they like that? That's a pretty generous helping of bedding now that we've not only repurposed the old top coating, but we're also supplementing with a nice big generous handful of my prepared bedding. I think that's going to make for a really popular place for the worms to want to hang out. Alrighty, so let's see. Do we have everything? Just got to remember at the end, I'd really like to get some of this, so I should really position it nearby so I can't forget. But now I think we're all set in the feeding zone, so we can cover up. Look at all this beautiful material that's collecting here. Very, very nice. I do see, you know, almost everywhere when I pull up a handful of stuff, not only am I, you know, greeted by a whole bunch of beautiful castings, but there is a whole bunch of bedding material, you know, mixed everywhere in it too. Just that when I encounter these larger clumps of material that's all kind of matted together and clumping, it just feels like I want to try to break it apart a little bit if possible. So let's get these feeding zones covered up. Very, very nice. One type of bedding that I don't have on hand right now is I'm running really low on the leaves that I've got a big bag of outside. So I've got to replenish, so I've got some yummy tomato here for these guys too as a snack near the surface. Or will it begin growing? We're going to have a big tomato patch growing right here in the middle of bin number 1 next time? Could be. Alright, now we can do an official tilling of this outer edge. We just did a little quick peek earlier, but that counts for something. That means we're part of the way there already, but I just wanted to use a handful of that stuff as additional cover for our feeding zone. See, once again, it feels like big mounds of clumped together shredded paper, which would eventually go. I wouldn't have to worry about it, you know, but I like to help stuff like that where I can. One more opportunity to grab a couple handfuls of cover material over here, but I think our feeding zones are pretty well covered at this point, and I think we can also safely say that everything's been nicely aerated as well. To me, it looks like these worms are quite content, and hopefully we can keep them feeling that way going forward. Before we cover up and introduce the nice new replacement top coverings, I'm doing this quickie dose of BTI. We already put some in earlier, and oh, look at this little guy. He was pretty quick to try to exit the bin. Gotta keep my eyes open for little rogue wormies that want to, for whatever reason, climb and get away. But hopefully this little guy will find himself a spot to burrow down into and feel safe. Alright everyone, that's pretty much the end of our check-in here. We've got ourselves a couple nice replacement top coverings. No feeding zone indicators. I'm not feeding with coffee today, and that's usually where I get my feeding zone indicators. Just an old coffee filter resting on top of the spot where we last fed. But it's also a pretty easy way to determine where you last fed by other means, you know. Maybe just look for where there's a big huge cavity of the food having been eaten, and that void is kind of a telltale as to where you last fed. Or just go looking for it. Have some fun trying to track down that last feeding zone. In my systems, it's pretty much down the middle. So I got a few things that I got to take care of getting cleaned up and put away around here, but I'm not going to keep you around for that because that's boring. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.